Title: The Great Farm Feud. The morning started just like any other. A fresh cup of coffee in hand, I stood on my porch, inhaling the crisp air of my farm. The world was peaceful. My ducks waddled lazily near the pond, their soft quacks blending harmoniously with the rustling leaves. Everything was exactly how it should be. Then, the barking started. The frantic quacking that followed made my stomach drop. My coffee splashed onto my hand as I bolted toward the noise, my boots pounding against the dewy grass. By the time I reached the pond, feathers were flying through the air like scattered snowflakes, and there, in the middle of the chaos, was a large golden retriever. Its eyes gleamed with excitement, and its tail wagged furiously as it lunged at my flock, sending ducks scattering in every direction. I shouted, waving my arms, trying to scare the dog off. It ignored me, too engrossed in its game of terrorizing my birds. Then I spotted her, standing at the edge of my property, arms crossed, an amused smirk on her lips. "Karen, relax," she called out, rolling her eyes. "They're just birds. Just birds." I clenched my fists, taking a deep breath to stop myself from saying something that would make me the bad guy in this situation. My ducks weren't just birds. They were part of my farm, part of my life. They trusted me to keep them safe. I stormed over to her, barely keeping my voice steady. "Your dog is trespassing on my property and terrorizing my ducks. Keep it on a leash," Karen scoffed, flipping her perfectly styled blonde bob over her shoulder. "Oh, come on. You're being dramatic. Ducks can fly, can't they? They'll be fine." "That's not the point." I ground my teeth together. "Your dog has no business being here. This is my land, and if you don't keep it under control, I'll involve animal control." Her face twisted into an exaggerated expression of mock fear. "Oh, I'm so scared." She let out a sharp laugh. "It's a dog, not a wolf. Chill out." I exhaled sharply, realizing there was no reason with her. She turned and strutted away, calling her dog, which trotted after her, still wagging its tail. My ducks huddled in the water, traumatized but unharmed. For now. That was the first time it happened, and as much as I wished it were the last, I had no idea that this was just the beginning of an all-out war. After Karen's dog's first attack, I didn't waste any time. I reinforced my fencing, adding extra wire and making sure there were no weak spots for an overenthusiastic golden retriever to slip through. If Karen wouldn't take responsibility for her pet, I'd make sure she had no chance to cause trouble again. But Karen was a special kind of entitled. She wasn't the type to respect boundaries, whether they were physical fences or basic human decency. A few days passed in relative peace. My ducks gradually returned to their normal routine, though they were still a little skittish around the pond. I was hopeful that Karen had gotten the message. Then it happened again. I was in the vegetable garden, tending to my tomatoes, when I heard it, the now all-too-familiar sound of barking and panicked quacking. My stomach twisted into knots as I sprinted toward the pond. There it was again. Karen's dog, tearing through my yard like it owned the place, sending my ducks scattering in every direction. And there she was, standing at the fence, arms crossed, a smug smile on her lips. "Karen," I shouted, frustration thick in my voice. "Get your dog off my property." She smirked, tilting her head. "Oh, come on, they need the exercise." I wanted to scream. Instead, I forced myself to breathe. "This is your last warning. Next time, I'm calling the authorities." Karen let out an exaggerated sigh. "Fine, fine. Come on, Max." The dog took one last, half-hearted lunge toward a duck before trotting back to her. I watched as they disappeared into their yard, my blood boiling. I knew her type. Entitled. Dismissive. Someone who had never faced real consequences in her life. I should have called animal control right then and there, but I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. That was a mistake. A few days later, I was inside enjoying a quiet afternoon when I heard a different kind of noise. Not barking. Not quacking. Screaming. I rushed outside just in time to see her. Karen, running full speed across my property, arms flailing, her expensive sandals slapping against the dirt as she shrieked. And behind her, in perfect formation, were my geese. Now, if you've never dealt with geese before, let me explain something. Ducks may be cute, but geese? Geese are warriors. My geese don't run from danger. They're the danger. And right now, they had their sights locked on the enemy, Karen. She tripped over a tree root and nearly face-planted before scrambling to her feet, breathless and disoriented. "Call them off," she screeched, barely managing to dodge a lunging goose that was aiming straight for her ankles. I crossed my arms and leaned against the fence, watching the scene unfold. "Huh," I said, pretending to think. "I thought you said they were just birds." Her face twisted in fury, but she was too busy running to respond. "Now, before anyone thinks I'm cruel, let me clarify, I did not send my geese after her. They simply took the initiative. They had witnessed her dog terrorizing my ducks, and geese have a very simple way of dealing with threats: eliminate them. Eventually, Karen made it to the edge of my property and stumbled over the fence, gasping for air. My geese stopped their pursuit, standing at the border like proud little sentinels, watching her with their beady, judgmental eyes. She turned back toward me, her face beet red with embarrassment and fury. This is ridiculous," she stammered. "You trained those demons to attack me." I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't train them to do anything. Maybe they just don't like entitled people." She let out an incoherent scream of frustration before storming back toward her house, muttering something about a lawsuit. I wasn't worried. She had no case, no proof of any wrongdoing on my part. My geese were defending their territory, something her dog had failed to understand. I thought, maybe now she'll learn her lesson. I was wrong. The next morning, I found something that made my blood run cold. My fence, reinforced after her dog's first attack, had been tampered with. It wasn't broken completely, but the wire ties securing part of it had been loosened, leaving a gap wide enough for a medium-sized dog to squeeze through. I stared at it for a long moment, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no way this was an accident. I had just checked the fence yesterday. It was sturdy, locked in place. Someone had messed with it, and I had a very good idea who. Fury bubbled inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Losing my temper wouldn't fix anything. Instead, I grabbed my tools and repaired the fence, making sure it was even stronger than before. Then, I set up a security camera facing that section of my property. If Karen wanted to play dirty, fine, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I didn't have to wait long before Karen escalated things even further. The very next afternoon, I was in my kitchen, washing a batch of freshly picked vegetables, when I heard it again. The barking. The panicked quacking. But this time, something was different. A scream. Not Karen's. My ducks. I dropped the cucumber in my hands, barely noticing as it hit the floor and rolled under the counter. My feet were already moving, sprinting full speed toward the noise, my pulse hammering in my ears. I rounded the corner to my yard and felt my heart stop. Karen's dog had gone beyond chasing this time. It had a duck in its mouth. One of my younger ducks, barely more than a duckling, was flailing helplessly between the dog's jaws, its tiny wings beating desperately against the dog's face. The dog shook its head violently, sending feathers flying. Something inside me snapped. "Drop it," I bellowed, my voice so loud it startled even me. The dog froze for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to close the distance. Fueled by pure rage, I grabbed a bucket of water from the side of the house and hurled it at the dog. The cold shock made it yelp and finally loosen its grip. My poor duckling tumbled to the ground, shivering and gasping. I didn't have time to process my emotions. I scooped up the terrified bird and turned just in time to see her. Karen, standing at my fence, smiling. My vision blurred red. "Are you out of your mind?" I roared, cradling the trembling duck in my arms. "Your dog nearly killed my duck." Karen tilted her head, arms crossed over her chest. "Oh, calm down. It's called the food chain." That was it. That was the moment I knew there was no reason with her. No more warnings. No more second chances. I set my duckling down gently, turned toward her, and pulled out my phone. Karen's smirk faltered. "Excuse me." I took a step closer to the fence, my eyes locking onto hers. "You just declared war." She opened her mouth, probably to toss another snarky remark, but I was already dialing. I had given her every opportunity to stop. Now she was about to find out what happened when you push someone too far. The animal control officer arrived faster than I expected. Apparently, Karen already had multiple complaints against her, and my security footage was just the nail in the coffin. By the time they knocked on her door, she was shaking with barely contained rage. She tried to lie her way out of it, of course. But the footage didn't lie. Her face turned an impressive shade of red as the officer handed her a hefty fine. But that wasn't even the best part. She was given a formal warning. If her dog was caught off-leash one more time, it would be seized. Karen turned toward me, her expression pure hatred. "This is harassment," she shrieked. "You set me up." I smiled. "No, Karen. I warned you." Her lips curled into a snarl. "You'll regret this." I shrugged. "We'll see." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving her fuming on her front porch. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to satisfaction. But I knew Karen. She wasn't done. And neither was I. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of control returning to my farm. Karen had finally been forced to face consequences. Her smug attitude had crumbled, replaced by a deep-seated rage that simmered behind every glare she shot my way. But something told me she wasn't done yet. She wasn't the type to let things go. And I was right. The next morning, I stepped outside with my coffee, taking a deep breath of the cool air, relishing the silence. No barking. No panicked quacking. Just peace. Then, I saw it. A pile of feathers. My stomach twisted as I rushed toward the pond, my heart hammering against my ribs. My geese were huddled together, tense and alert, their eyes locked on something at the edge of my property. And then I spotted the blood. It was just a few splashes near the fence, but it was enough to send a surge of fury coursing through me. I knew what had happened. Karen had let her dog out again. I didn't even hesitate. I stormed toward her house and pounded on the door so hard the frame rattled. She opened it, looking half asleep, her hair a tangled mess. "What now?" she grumbled. "You know damn well what now. I see that. Your dog attacked my animals again." She yawned, stretching her arms above her head. "Prove it." I gritted my teeth so hard my jaw ached. "You think I won't? You think I don't have cameras?" That wiped the laziness off her face. "You're insane," she spat. "Always watching me like some kind of creep. I'm protecting my animals from you." She huffed and slammed the door in my face. That was it. No more warnings. No more chances. I pulled out my phone and called animal control. This time, I wasn't just reporting an off-leash dog. I was pressing charges. The officer arrived within the hour, and this time, they weren't playing around. I handed them the footage, clear as day, showing Karen sneaking out in the early hours, unlocking her gate, and letting her dog slip onto my property. It wasn't negligence anymore. It was intentional. When they knocked on her door, I watched from a distance as she answered with her usual smug attitude. It didn't last long. The moment they informed her that she was facing legal consequences, she lost it. "This is ridiculous. It's just a dog." "Ma'am, your dog was involved in repeated trespassing and attacks on livestock. That's a serious offense." "Livestock? They're ducks." "The law doesn't see a difference," the officer said flatly. "You were warned multiple times. Now, the county is seizing the animal." Her mouth fell open. "You can't take him." "We can, and we will. You're also facing fines and potential criminal charges for property damage and animal endangerment." Karen turned on me then, her eyes wild. "This is your fault. You ruined everything." "No, Karen," I said, my voice steady. "You did this to yourself." She screamed in frustration as the officers loaded her dog into their vehicle. It barked once, looking back at her, confused. And just like that, the war was over. Karen tried to fight it, of course. She ranted about lawsuits, about calling the HOA, about getting revenge. None of it mattered. The town knew what she had done. The neighbors, once indifferent, had watched her spiral into pure entitlement, and now she had lost everything. Her dog was gone. Her reputation? Ruined. A month later, her house went up for sale. She was leaving. The morning she packed up, I stood by my fence, watching as the moving truck pulled away. She glanced at me one last time. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I smiled, tipped my coffee toward her in farewell, and watched as she disappeared down the road. For the first time in months, my farm was truly mine again. My ducks were safe. My geese stood guard like victorious warriors. And as the sun rose over my land, I took a deep breath, relishing the peace that had finally returned.